All right, let's not waste any time, kicking things off with our thoughts on DVO's Onyx 38 fork. The Onyx D138 is the latest fork to materialize from the minds of longtime suspension gurus DVO. With a storied history of developing high-end forks and shocks, DVO's first dip into 38mm chassis realm was executed with methodical observation and intention. It's not just a souped-up version of their popular Diamond Trail fork or a variant of their burly Onyx DC downhill fork. The Onyx 38 represents a new era for DVO of creating purpose-designed forks from the ground up. Beginning at the CSU, an all-new crown uses thicker arms with a dual hollow bore design to improve strength and stiffness while keeping weight within reason. The crown also has an oversized race platform to stabilize the steer tube during high-load impacts. The arch was intentionally reinforced and relieved in certain areas to provide predictable handling without causing deflection or harshness. As forces increase through the arch, it becomes stiffer, helping it remain compliant and comfortable under small loads and supportive and controlled during high-force impacts. Extra long bushing overlap within the lowers further reduces flex and the amount of damping force needed because there is less binding as the stanchions cycle through the lowers. Overall, DVO feels the Onyx 38 offers the best combination of stiffness and compliance, predictability, direct steering, and comfort. Inside the Onyx 38 is the latest version of DVO's D1 damper. It uses their exclusive compression bladder system that is now 30% larger than before to increase off-the-top sensitivity and consistency. A new high-flow compression circuit provides support and damping through the middle portion of the stroke, but allows for easier compression during fast impacts. There is also a new high-flow rebound circuit to improve the damper's response time during high-speed impacts. Combined, these updates are intended to create supportive damping during the majority of the stroke without any unwanted compression harshness or packing during big impacts. External adjustments include high and low-speed compression and low-speed rebound. DVO aimed to widen the range of adjustability to accommodate more riders. This allows those seeking comfort or those riding hard and wanting support to arrive at a dialed setup. There is an extensive setup guide on DVO's website with recommended settings based on rider weight or air pressure, which is what we use for our initial setup. The D1 damper is paired with DVO's new SL Superlight air spring. Unlike the OTT air spring found in DVO's other models, which uses an externally adjustable negative spring, the SL uses a familiar dual air chamber design. This helps keep fork weight down and allows for a broader range of rider weights to achieve a proper setup. DVO says the SL air spring provides great small bump sensitivity with no mid-stroke hammock, while ending stroke progression can be tuned via volume reducers. Final fork details include a floating axle and a removable integrated fender. The Onyx D138 is available in green, gray, or black with travel options of 160, 170, and 180 millimeters. It is only compatible with a 29-inch wheel and has a 44mm offset with a 203mm brake mount. We tested the gray colorway with 170mm of travel that retails for $1,150 and weighed in at 2,616 grams. This landed the Onyx 38 at the top as the heaviest in the test and around mid-pack when it comes to price. With big promises of next-level chassis performance and steering response, we were all excited to see if the Onyx 38 would outshine the bigger OEM competitors.
Oh, I didn't see you come in. Welcome back to Vital Test Sessions. Yeah, so setting up the fork wasn't the most straightforward. We took DVO's recommended settings, which are super in-depth. I think they do a really good job of establishing a baseline for people to start at, but the damper in our fork ended up with roughly 8 to 10 more clicks than what is listed, so we kind of struggled with finding where the middle actually was. We weren't sure where the extra 10 clicks were, if it was 5 on one end or the other, or if they were all on the open end or the closed end, but we kind of had a bit of trial and error on trail just getting it to a place that was happy.
So I had an interesting path getting the DVO's new Onyx 38 set up. I started with the recommended settings, which was more reliant on the damper for support, running more compression, and with their recommended air pressure, and found that I was just sitting too low in the stroke to begin with, just sitting too low deep in the travel. And the fork was bouncing more over high-speed square edge impacts than I wanted. It wasn't absorbing that impact. I ended up going maybe like a more traditional route for me, which was taking out all the compression. I added a volume reducer, added more pressure, and that helped the fork tremendously. Kept the fork riding more consistent ride height, wasn't cycling through its travel as much, and it also took the edge off of square edge hits way better. And overall, I just had a lot less feedback from those first few initial runs. So if I was going to get this fork or someone's getting this fork, I would start that route, get your pressure set to the amount of support you're looking for out of the fork, and leave your compression open, and then start adding compression damping where you see fit. Once I had the fork in a good place and felt like my setup was good, the Onyx just performed decent kind of across the board. Didn't stand out in any real particular way to me. It had decent support, it had decent traction and grip, maintained a decent consistent ride height through the rock gardens we rode. Just kind of across the board, it did everything well, but there wasn't one particular part of the trails we rode that it rose above the other forks to me.
In some of the bigger compressions, it was very stable, and even in like the smaller compressions that like are just kind of awkward in the rock gardens, it went all the way through its travel, but it didn't like buck you funny or like try and kick out on you. It was just very consistent. So overall, I thought the fork was pretty rad.
What stood out on trail to me was just the super light off the top sensitivity. It was pretty sweet for the flatter terrain that was rough, but I found that the fork just sat into its travel a little bit too easily. And while the damper did have a good amount of support, because of that super light feeling, it kind of just sat in a wall of support most of the time. So one thing that was important with this was, I think, going up in air pressure. That seemed to help quite a bit. Just keeping the fork kind of in the little, supple window sensitivity. And then with the supportive feeling out of the damper, it was pretty good through the heavier compressions and successive hits. One thing I wish it had was a high speed adjustment for the rebound, because with that higher pressure, when you would get through the travel, it would rebound pretty rapidly deep in the travel. So overall, it was definitely more comfortable on flatter terrain, and I think it offers great traction, but just because of how soft it was, it kind of suffered with the overall comfort.
Yeah, it was just a fork that I knew what it was going to do in every situation, which brings a lot of confidence, but at the same time, maybe left some performance or ride feel to be desired. I think the least favorite thing about this fork to me was that I found the chassis to be pretty stiff. I felt way more percent of the bumps I was hitting compared to some of the other forks we tested, and that just led to more hand fatigue, more arm fatigue, especially later in the day. I think that could be solved a bit more if I were to continue riding this fork. I would keep going down that route of adding pressure, backing off compression to allow the fork to just move more freely, and then rely on that air spring to give me the support I desire. One last thing that I do think is cool is that you do get a fender with this fork, which can't be said about most of the forks we tested. You can buy one separately, but this one at least comes with it, and it looks pretty cool.